So let's just plunge into some bhakti discussions. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharma swarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Oh, may this be an offering to Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa Dev. Om Tat Sat. So, you guys, we've had a very wonderful opportunity recently since it was just Gaur Purnima, Chaitanya's emergence day, Caitanya Jayanti. We had a wonderful opportunity recently to talk about Gaudiya Vaishnavism and about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in various ways. We talked first about Sri Chaitanya Deva's philosophy. And there, in that lecture, I argued that this philosophy was not really necessarily Chaitanya Deva's philosophy, but the philosophy that was established around his life by a group of very close disciples known as the Goswamis, Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and their nephew Jiva Goswami. So we talked about that philosophy, which is really intricate, really subtle, really beautiful. It's called acintya, bhedābedha, and we devoted a whole lecture to the nuances of that particular brand of non-dual Vedanta. And we compared acintya, bhedābedha to Shankara's Kevala Advaita. And we maybe reference Ramanuja a little bit in that lecture also. So we had a purely philosophical treatment of Chaitanya Deva. Then, the Monday following that lecture, we did something far more exciting in my opinion. We looked at the life of this great spiritual master. I once attended a talk by a great nun, and my guru was there and I was there and we were both listening to this nun. And after the talk, and she's, like a totally enlightened being and powerful nun, Shakti embodied. And so I step out with my guru and we're talking about this talk that we just saw. And my guru leans in and he says, "It's not the words that matter, it's the life. Look at the life. Look at the life." With such urgency he said it. And this also happened in Belramat, in the Ramakrishna monastery. There were a group of people in the early days who were studying Upanishads. And Shivananda Maharaj, Mahapurush Maharaj, saw them studying the Upanishads. And he said, "It would be enough, my boys, if you studied our lives." That sounds like a really grandiose statement. But I think he meant it. If you study the lives of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Turiyanandaji is Vedanta embodied. Vivekananda is immanence, Kriya Shakti embodied. And through looking at the lives of these great masters, we start to understand that this stuff is real. We don't really know about spirituality until we come into the contact of a really spiritual person, a genuinely holy person. Then we understand it's real. Proof of God is very simple. It's there in the eyes of one who has seen her. So I thought it'd be more important than talking about Chaitanya's philosophy. It's more important to talk about his life. And that's what we did in the next lecture. So the second part of the series was Chaitanya Deva's life. And the ecstatic fervor of that life was really moving and exciting to talk about. And the third thing we talked about, and I thought this was maybe more relevant to us, because the life is inspiring. But as an ideal, we have to then ask the question, how can we get there? I also want to have that ecstasy, that fervor. I also want to be lost in the absolute joy of devotion. How can I get there though? The next thing we talked about were practices. So there's a whole bhakti tradition oriented around what you can do, and there are different stages of that practice. So that lecture, which very excitingly we did at actually Chaitanya Devi's house. We went to a person whose name is Caitanya, and there we met her cow, her bull, and some of you were there. It was wonderful. We had an hour of kirtan, about an hour-ish of kirtan. It was wonderful. We saw the cow. The cow's name is Nandi, and they had two sheep, Balarama and Krishna, black and white sheep. And they had a bunch of ponies. One pony was Pixie, I think, and there was a horse who resembled Richard, and so I think the horse is now named Richard, after our dear Richard, Rudra Deva. So we had the third lecture in Chaitanya's house, and there we talked about the practices of bhakti, which I think is the most important thing. But there's one thing I kind of left out. In the fury and fervor of that talk, I forgot to mention actually some distinct innovations that come from Sri Chaitanya Deva that actually expands the bhakti tradition that we inherit from the Bhagavata Purana. I just totally forgot to mention them. And they are Nama Parada and Seva Paradha. Seva Paradha, I think, yeah. And these are, and also Guru Yoga, emphasis on Guru Yoga. So violations of the name, violations of worship, and Guru Yoga. These three things Chaitanya Deva adds on. But not only that, he emphasizes certain things also that other bhakti teachers haven't emphasized. So now I have in mind for today's lecture, 3 bhakti teachers that we've studied in the course of, we've studied 4, properly speaking, bhakti teachers in the course of our time together. We've studied Ramanuja, but I'll kind of leave him out of it today. I won't pick on him too much today. There are 3 bhakti teachers that I have in mind for today's lecture. Nārada, whose work is the central focus of our class on Fridays, Nārada Bhakti Sūtra. Rāmakrishna, Paramahansa Dev, whose lineage we belong to. And thirdly, Caitanya Deva, who we just now had the opportunity to speak about at some length. So let's put the three of these Bhakti teachers together, and let's today ask the question, what do they all have in common? What's being corroborated here? And what are some of the differences amongst them? Because I think that would be very productive for us to be honest, like as bhaktas, we have to be quite clear about what bhakti constitutes and what it looks like to really practice devotion. So I thought it'd be nice to look at some of the nuances of bhakti practice in the context of a comparative discussion. I think that'd be fun. Would you be down for that? And one thing I didn't get to do, which I think is very exciting and important to do, is compare the Krishna-Radha dynamic in Acintya bhedābedha to the Shiva-Shakti dynamic in Kashmir Shaivism or in the wider Kaulatrika tradition. Because it seems like there are some parallels, right? And so we have to ask, like, to what extent are they similar? To what extent do they differ? And doing this is not to privilege any one school over any other school. We're not making any sectarian claims here. To do this is actually to bring out the nuances in each individual school and thereby enjoy each of them more. It's good that chocolate ice cream is different from mint choc chip. Because then, when you have them both in a cone together, you can taste the nuances and really enjoy each flavor in its own right. But if you mix all the ice creams together, you'll get a hint of taste there, a hint of taste here, and that's what today's New Age looks like a little bit. You know, it's all just a hodgepodge, a kitchery of all these different traditions. Once I was in a bookstore, and a very like New Agey festival goer type guy was there, and he was looking through the various shelves, and you know, he was making eye contact with me, so I just asked him, so what are you looking for? He said, the Book of the Dead. I was like, oh, how very exciting. Tibetan or Egyptian? And he gave me this very quizzical look, like, what's the difference? It was very interesting. And then we got to talking, and you know, he rattles off some kind of appropriated, misunderstood ideas about Hinduism, and naturally I flex a little bit. I start parroting Sanskrit verses, and then the whole frame of the interaction changed. It went from this very like, I'm looking into your eyes, bro. My name is, you know, and some fancy name. I'm not going to say it. I don't want to, like, actually out this guy. But, like, some really fancy, like, edgy festival name like that. And he's holding my hand. And he's doing this kind of, like, body energy work thing. And we're having this whole thing. And then, suddenly, when he realized that that wasn't the vibe, he was like, oh, my name's Jeff. And, like, everything became real and normal and grounded. And we had this wonderful conversation. But it was interesting because you could see how there was a kind of confusion. And it's perfectly natural because he hadn't yet interacted with any primary sources. All he was getting was this kind of almost theosophical hodgepodge kitchery of all the world's spiritual traditions all boiled down into one unnameable, unmanageable mass. So it is actually valuable to recognize that every tradition is unique and that each lineage has its own distinctive flavor. And in the Ramakrishna Paramahansa tradition, the goal is not to smush them all into one, but the goal is to recognize the unity in diversity, to see what's underlying them all, and yet let each and every one of them shine according to their own brilliance and in their own light. So I think that's very valuable to do, actually. So by comparing Krishna Chaitanya's Radha dynamic to the Shiva Shakti dynamic and seeing what's similar and what's different, we can bring more out of both traditions. And more importantly, we can bring more out of our own sadhana and our own relationship to God. So today's lecture is really exciting, I think. So I want to start with this. The religion of the Bhagavata Purana, one of the most profound Puranic texts of all time. And in what ways Nārada, Rāmakrishna, and Caitanya differ regarding some scenes in the Bhagavata Purana. Oh, and of course we'll have to talk about Shankara. We'll have to compare all of this, of course, to Shankara in the for Visuddheva. Okay, so the first thing to point out here is that the Bhagavata Purana, and we'll start here, is really, really profound and really, really diverse. It's quite a broad text, the context of the text, and we surprisingly didn't really talk about it in the course of talking about Krishna Chaitanya, which is strange because it's all centered around the Bhagavata, actually, that whole tradition. Bhakti, the Bhakti tradition of the Vaishnavas, is pretty much centered around the Bhagavata, and it's because of this Bhagavata dharma, the Bhagavata tradition, that we get forms of Shakta Bhakti and Shaiva Bhakti. A lot of these Bhakti traditions, even within Shaivism, have been influenced a great deal by the attitudes and modes and practices of the Bhagavata Purana. So the first thing to point out is that this is a pretty profound text and pretty diverse, and it takes 9 books before we even start talking about Krishna. You know, the context of the Bhagavata Purana is that there's a king, for reasons that we don't need to go into right now, has only 7 days left to live. He was bitten by a snake, a rishi's curse, what have you. And in these final 7 days, he's asking himself, how do I productively use my time? And he's a very wise king, a very noble king, and so he realizes that he should talk about God and think about God and try to come to terms with the divine reality. he's soon to meet his creator after all. So he becomes very interested in religion. Usually people become very interested in religion when they're close to death. But unfortunately, at that time, they can no longer sit upright and meditate or do anything about that interest. So usually when people become interested in religion, they're often too old and too feeble to do anything about it. But this whole thing is a metaphor because we're all in Parokshit's position. We've all been bitten by the snake of mortality. And we're all of us awaiting death. And we don't know when that day is going to be. At least Parokshit understands that there are 7 days. And imagine how much more you would get out of life if you felt like there was only a week left in front of you. I mean, what would you do differently? This memento mori, sort of carpe diem, or in Laleshwari's case, carpe noctem kind of idea. How would you seize the day? How would you live your life? And Parokshit, to his credit, decides to call Shukadeva, a fully illumined being, an avatar in his own right, to come and talk to him about God. And that's all Ramakrishna did anyway. In fact, in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the first thing that comes to M's mind when he sees Ramakrishna is Shukadeva. He thinks, he's just like Shukadeva. Here he is, seated on his couch in the evening, surrounded by devotees, and all he's doing is talking about God. Ramakrishna did pretty much nothing else but talk about God all day. So that's what Shukadeva was sent for, and he came to the court of King Parokshit, and he just talked about God. And so King Parokshit asks him questions, and he launches into this narrative, and it's a Purana. So remember, if you read a Purana, it's enthralling, because it's stories within stories within stories within stories within stories. I wanted to read the Devi Bhagavatam. One of my things was to read the Devi Bhagavatam every night before I went to bed. I quickly realized that was not a very wise thing to do, because already I'm not getting enough sleep. Now, when I pick up the Bhagavatam, even less likely that I'm going to fall asleep, because I'll just get so absorbed in his stories within stories within stories, and by the time you pull your head from the book, you're like, wait, oh my god, it's like already time for morning meditation. So it's alluring. The books are so beautiful. The Puranas are so beautiful. Bhagavatam is no different. And of course it tells all sorts of stories, like the story of Jaya and Vijaya, Vishnu's door guards, who Vishnu curses to become demons because they insulted the Shanat Kumaras, so Brahma's 4 sons. They insulted them, and so Vishnu curses Jaya and Vijaya to reincarnate as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. So we get this wonderful story of this demon lord Hiranyakashipu and his very devout son Prahlada. One of the most fascinating stories in the Bhagavata. The young boy loves God. His family are all asuras. They all hate God. But interestingly, this arch nemesis, this hater of God, was himself previously God's very own doorman. There's a wonderful Leela going on here. So this is where the Lord comes down as Narasingha, the fierce man-lion avatara. And the avatar, it really is like Arabian Nights, right? And I think the Arabic tradition of the Arabian Nights tradition, I think you're right, Dustin, has some kind of connection, because the Mughal Empire, you can see there's the Persian Empire in India. There's a lot of similar themes also. It's very exciting. So then in the story, the Prahlada story, God comes as the man-lion. And the man-lion is a very gory situation where Hiranyakashipu, through his austerity, gets a boon. He cannot be killed by either a man or a beast. He cannot be killed at day or at night. He cannot be killed either inside or outside. Demons can never wish for immortality, but they try to tax collector, accountant their way into getting more than they. So he gets his. And so God comes down as a man-lion, neither man, neither beast, kills him at twilight, neither day, neither night, and kills him on the threshold of his house, neither inside, neither outside. That's what happens to these guys. Or, there's one great story of Tarakasura who got the boon. I can only be killed if I lust after my own mother. And even this demon thought that was impossible. This demon was like, there's no way I could possibly lust after my own mother. And then he fell in love with Parvati. And there's this whole backstory here about how he's actually Parvati's son. But he doesn't know that. So it's like this Oedipal sort of thing. Because arguably, Oedipus doesn't really have an Oedipal complex. He doesn't understand, right, that Jocasta is not his mother. And when he understands that Jocasta is his mother, he freaks the fuck out and gorges his own eyes out. But interestingly, this demon, and there's a wonderful idea actually about this wholesale massacre and rape of nature, because we treat her as an object, as a desirable object to be used as a means and not seen as our mother. It's a deep commentary actually on our relationship to nature and all that. But in any case, in all of these stories, the demons always wish for something, but sneakily they don't really get it. So you get that in the Prahlada story. And of course, there's that beautiful story of Dhruva, which happens a little earlier. He's like this young boy who has daddy issues. His father expels him from his sight, because of a stepmother, and it's a whole thing. And this poor young boy, goes into the forest to practice austerities, not to get God, but to get the affection of his father. And he does indeed get God. And so it's a beautiful story, Dhruva, King Dhruva. Then there's that wonderful story of Bharata, King Bharata, who performs crazy austerities in the forest, becomes a very high-flying yogi, only to fall in love with his pet deer so obsessively that his last thought before he passed away was this deer, causing him to reincarnate in his next life as a deer, as per the Gita, what your last thought will be, that will be the momentum of your future birth. So he's reincarnated as a deer, but because of all his austerities, he's reincarnated as a deer in a rishi's place. So he goes into a rishi's home and he hangs out there. And then after his deer incarnation, which was a little detour, he then incarnates as a person with Down syndrome, but who is enlightened. So we get this wonderful story of this enlightened Down syndrome master. It's called Jara Bharata. And because he's neuroatypical, he gets taken advantage of and stuff, and there's this whole sad tragic story, but he is a Brahmagyani, so inwardly he's full of joy. And there's this conversation between him and Rahuguna, a king. He's forced to bear Rahuguna's palanquin, and because he doesn't give just walks whatever, he doesn't really care about anything, Rahuguna gets angry. And Rahuguna comes in, who is this palanquin bearer who can't even walk straight and keep rhythm? And they have this really Vedantic, deeply Jnana type conversation. It's beautiful. All this is in the Bhagavata. You learn about like the boar avatara, Varaha and Matsya, first Matsya, then Varaha, and you learn about like Parashurama. So all sorts of avatars, animal avatars, half man, half animal avatars, like fierce wild man avatars. You hear about all sorts of things in the Bhagavata. But it takes like 9 books to get to Krishna. It's a really interesting thing. And finally, when you get to Krishna, book 10 and 11, you learn about Krishna, how who he is. He's God incarnate. He's born much like Jesus. Jesus is born in a manger. He's a king, but he's born in quote unquote lowly circumstances. Similarly, Krishna is a king, a prince, but he's born in a prison and he's swapped at birth. And there's a whole beautiful like birth arc here. And there are demons. And by the way, the demons that Krishna kills are the same demons, Jaya and Vijaya. The demons that Prahlada doesn't kill them, Narasimha does. It's Jaya and Vijaya. It's like such a beautiful story. But anyway, there's one episode in the Bhagavata that Sri Krishna Caitanya very much loved, that Narada references, and that Sri Ramakrishna was also very fond of. And that is the episode of Krishna in Vraja, in Vrindavan, with the gopis. So what is the Bhagavata? A profound text with many, many, many themes. It's primarily Sankhyan in orientation, with some Vedantic elements, with some yogic elements, but primarily it's a Sankhyan presentation of Indian spirituality across various different approaches, though it's usually styled as a bhakti book. I've been studying it with my guru for some time, and he'll usually, he'll be reading it, and he'll look up suddenly and say, "This bhakti book? This is a bhakti book?" Usually after having read some very dense and philosophically subtle passage regarding the immortal nature of the self and the non-duality thereof. So, although it's styled as a bhakti book, it has a lot of jnana, yoga, and sankhya ideas in it. It's very exciting. In any case, it's primarily the main textbook of bhakti, because above all, it gives us examples of super bhaktas, like Prahlada. Prahlada, wow, don't even get me started. I don't want to do the Prahlada lecture right now, but once you start talking about these people, your heart just races, because, oh my god, that this happened, and whether or not it happened doesn't matter, that this is even conceptually possible, that there could have been a person like this. It's profound. Anyway, so Krishna and the gopis is the central narrative around which Gaudiya Vaishnavism is formed. This Rasa Leela, it's called. And in the Bhagavata, books 10 and 11, etc., you get this character, Radha, who is herself a milkmaid, and a group of milkmaids, gopis they're called, who are all absolutely crazy about Krishna. And the whole myth is centered around unchaste love, actually. So, there's a kind of love between Rama and Sita, but that's called marital love. It's legal, lawful, societally accepted love. And that's wonderful. And so Sita and Rama are enjoying this divine relationship that a husband and wife can have, that a husband and husband or a wife and wife can have. Like something kind of respectable, yet deep and loyal and nurturing. But Radha enjoys something a little fiercer with Krishna. Radha is actually married. I think her family deity is Nrisimha Avatara, so they're Vaishnavas, but she married into a Shakta family. So her husband's deity is Kali, some Devi or some form like that. And so she's married, and like these gopis, some of them have children, and they typically, they have their lives. They're doing household duties, like they're making butter and, they're making curd and then ghee and making sweets and doing all the things a milkmaid would do in pastoral India at this time. But late at night, they hear a sound. You can think, Rumi and his reed flute, they hear a flute, the sound, a music of the flute. And here, by the way, the flute represents the Shushumna Nadi. So they hear this flute. There's a music in the nighttime, and it so intoxicates them. It so attracts them that they throw aside their pots and pans. They run away from their children, from their husbands. They run away from everything. They leave everything behind and they run into the forest late at night and plunge themselves into the embrace of Krishna. And Krishna, this lover boy par excellence, manages to diversify himself. So each gopi has their own Krishna. So he uses his yoga maya to manifest many Krishnas, and each gopi is able to sport with a particular Krishna. And the degree of how erotic this story is depends on who's telling it. So there's more apologetics on one end, where it's like, no, they're just children, like, shame on you for thinking this was like romantic and erotic. After all, Krishna must have been like, what, 9 at this time in his life? And you can make an argument for that. You can track Krishna's journey and you can see that he's actually very young. And so the gopis must have been very young too. And so this could be like kindergarten love, And that's not disparaging, actually. It's much more intense, I think. Puppy love, adults who say, oh, that's just puppy love. I'm like, no, it's puppy love. You don't understand. It's much more intense than any other kind of love that adults can enjoy, You and your practical love, this puppy love is wow. So anyway, some people make that argument that they're too young for like a romantic relationship, but it was intense and passionate, and the gopis were attracted to Krishna, but maybe what they were doing is just playing tag or hide and seek or something. So there's one end of the spectrum where you get a more orthodox, more conservative, more apologetic sort of explanation. On the other end, you get very literal readings where it's like, no. The gopis are like adolescent girls or like young adults. Krishna himself is this like adolescent beauty, this dark-skinned beauty with wild flowers in his hair, and he's got this like shoulder-length hair. His hair is not matted like Shiva or wild like Kali. It's like curly. It's like soft curls with wild flowers, and he's wearing a saffron robe, and his skin is radiant, and he's beautiful, and he's mysterious, and he's really charming, and he's a great musician, and all this stuff. And so he's an attractive man, a boy, not a man, a boy. He's an attractive boy. And all these gopis who are attractive women fall in love with him, and he with them, and they run off into the forest at night, and the husbands are sleeping at home, the children are sleeping at home. They're all of them aware that this is wrong, actually, that this is not okay, this is outside the injunctions of society, that this could ruin their whole lives. They know that if their husbands come to find out, like, this would be a mess, but they don't care. That's the difference. The love of the gopi and Krishna is different from the love of Sita and Ram, because that love is lawful and legal and, not as crazy and reckless. But Radha loves Krishna recklessly. The gopis love Krishna recklessly. So they're willing to ruin their whole lives for this kind of love. It's a profound love, and it's a unique love. It's called Madhurya. Madhu means sweetness. Madhurya means the love of sweetness, the honeyed love, if you will. Intense. So they run to the forest, and they have this like totally divine, yet totally earthy communion. And so on one end, the reading can go like this. They're just having this orgiastic experience of pure ecstasy of making love to God. So the erotic dimension of bhakti is being explored here. God as an erotic experience. So you can be anywhere along the spectrum. You can be closer to the more literalist reading of like young lovers trysting in the deep jungle at night. Or you can take the more apologetic reading of like prepubescent young children playing hide and seek. Doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum. The point is, the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition is primarily interested in this mythos, in this narrative arc, or in this imagery. And so Krishna Chaitanya, as we said in those lectures, is seen as Krishna in the mood of Radha. So the whole incarnation of Krishna Chaitanya, by the way, is not necessarily to teach people anything. Usually, remember in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, verse 7, chapter 4, right? I think it says there, yada yada hi dharmasya. There's a whole verse in the Bhagavad Gita as to what the purpose of the avatara is. And there we learn the avatara comes to correct adharma. So whenever the dharma is declining, the avatara comes to establish religion. So the role of like a Jesus or Prophet Muhammad, or the role of a Caitanya or a Shankara or a Ramakrishna, is like the re-up of Molly at the rave. It's just to like revitalize whatever religion they're born into. So in any case, Chaitanya did that. He totally revitalized the Bhakti tradition. But that might not have been his express purpose. It seems like Krishna incarnated as Chaitanya so that he too could enjoy what it meant to be Radha. So Chaitanya is this unique instance of Radha and Krishna in one being. And so he was able to enjoy his own bliss in a way that's fuller than at any other time in history. So Krishna Chaitanya is a unique incarnation because it seems to be an incarnation of joy. The purpose of that incarnation is not to save the world, although that's what happened. But the purpose of the incarnation is just for God to enjoy himself in this tradition. Krishna becomes becomes Chaitanya, who is Radha and Krishna combined. So we have to say the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition is really, really interested in the Rasa Leela, and so too is Sri Ramakrishna. So let me just say this. Now that we've discussed the Bhagavatam and we've come to the central part of the Bhagavatam, this erotic divine love between the gopis and Krishna, and of the gopis, no gopi can compare to Radha. She is the queen of the gopis, and she is the queen of lovers. No one could love so intensely as Radha. And this is all-consuming love, a love like a moth has for the flame, like that. She was totally, totally surrendered to Krishna. And the selflessness of that love was, a great model for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas to articulate their own idea of what bhakti really looked like. So the first thing I want to point out with regard to this whole Bhagavatam discussion is that Narada, Ramakrishna, and Chaitanya, all of them were deeply fascinated by this by this Bhagavatam Rasa Leela myth. So in the case of Narada, let's look at it right here. Narada, let's go to Narada first, since this is after all a Nārada Bhakti Sūtra class. And that's what we're studying. So Narada, you'll recall, I'll put up Swami Bhajananda Saraswati's translation here. You'll see, he gives a lot of definitions, right? He explores different definitions of bhakti. So this idea, I like this one. Naturally, this one really appeals to me. Puja dishvanuraga iti parasharyaha. So the son of Parashara, Vyasa, Parasharyaha, the son of the son. Oh, so Vyasa. Okay, Vyasa says that bhakti is a liking for puja. I once asked my Gurudev, I said, Maharaj, I as I understand it, my puja practices should be decreasing as I progress on the path of bhakti. Ramakrishna said, the sandhya merges into the Gayatri. So the puja should dissolve into the mantra. In other words, a single repetition of your mantra should have the same spiritual value as like a 2-hour puja. And then the mantra should merge into the Om or the Bij. So even the mantra should essentialize. Like that. So I asked Maharaj, I said, look, I've been practicing, but it seems like my pujas are getting longer. Is that a problem, actually? Am I regressing? And he laughed and he quoted this verse to me. Puja dishvanuraga iti parasharyaha. One of the symptoms of bhakti is a fondness for puja. Right, Laleshwari? So the more you like puja, and the more you feel like, oh, it's a loss to me to not do puja, you know that bhakti is arising. So that's one of the things. Then he says, okay, bhakti is discussions about God. So Garga, Kata Dishviti Gargaha. Garga says, one of the great Vedic rishis, he says that it's about talking about God. See, puja is something you do, right? Puja is something you do. But deeper than action is speech. Sri Ramakrishna was fond of saying, if you like to eat radishes, your breath will smell like radishes. You will belch what you eat. So if you come over to my house after a tuna sandwich, I'm going to know you ate the tuna sandwich. That's the idea. Similarly, you can do puja all you want. But if all you talk about is like worldly things, then that's a good indication of what you're thinking about. You see? So we talk about what we think about. We belch what we eat. So Garga says a better definition of bhakti is just talking about God. If you find yourself talking about God all the time, that alone is a good sign that you have bhakti, right? Then we can go further. No, actually not true. One can talk about God, but inwardly cherish other things. Talking is not even a good definition. What's even better is Atma Ratya Virodheneti Shandilyaha. So Shandila, another great bhakti poet, he says that bhakti is enjoying your own essence nature. Like Nora read to us yesterday, when I want to kiss God, I raise my own hands to my lips. So here's the deep understanding, like go inward and don't talk. Why should you talk? Enjoy God. They say, Ramakrishna would say, when the bee is sipping honey, it doesn't buzz. Like that. If you are enjoying God, why should you talk? You should be stunned. Madho bhavati, stabdho bhavati, atma ramo bhavati. You should be drunk, stunned, inwardly enjoying your own bliss. That's called bhakti. So this is doing, this is talking, this is being. Don't you see? The definitions are getting subtler and subtler. But then Narada, he goes, Narada is distancing himself from these very good definitions of bhakti. He's saying, but according to me, what real bhakti is not any of those things. Real bhakti is actually It's offering all, arpanam, arpita, offering all, akhila, every single thing, achara, all activities to that. So real bhakti is consecrating your whole life to God. And the symptom of this, he says, is parama vyakulata, extreme anguish if God is forgotten. That's important. So what does bhakti look like? It looks like anguish. Oh my God, what a thing to say. But you have to understand this. One tear cried in the name of God is sweeter than all the joys of the world combined. Tulsidas, I think, said something like that. This emotion has no English word. There are a few words that come to mind. One is, I think, a Lithuanian word I learned some time ago. Litost. Have you heard that word? Litost. And the person who was, I might be mispronouncing it so many years ago, but the person who was telling me this word said, it's the feeling a dog has when its owner has died in battle. I was like, fuck, that's intense. And she told me, like, imagine the dog roaming around the battlefield looking for its dead owner, and then it moans. The moaning of a dog who lost its owner in battle is this word litos. And I'm like, whoa. I didn't even know that was an emotion. And until we learn the word, we might not be able to learn the emotion. There's a German word, Schadenfreude, right? Delight in your enemy's that we all know that feeling, whether or not we know the word. But there's a Japanese opposite word, ijiroshi, which is this feeling of joy with your friend's success. So these words, they might point to emotions that maybe we don't really have words for in the English language. So the idea that like emotions and words can be related, it's interesting. Now there's a word, viraha, in the Sanskrit lexicon, and it means anguish at being separated from God. It's a unique kind of longing. It's like nothing else. I mean, we can long for our loved one, and that's profound. But when that loved one happens to be God, and you long for that loved one, and when you're longing for God, that is a sweet kind of anguish, actually. It's terrible, it's horrific, but it's beautiful and enlivening. I haven't read the Bhakti Yoga book by Edwin Bryant, but that Professor Edwin Bryant is wonderful. Maybe. I'm sure it's in there. Can't really talk about bhakti without talking about this viraha. So look at the definition. And again, last night we were on a Rumi Shams kick because Nora came and we were inspired in that direction. And you saw the whole thing was viraha, the experience of heart. I called it heartbreak sadhana last night. So this idea of parama vyakulata, supreme anguish at even a moment's forgetting of God. See, the idea here is as long as my mind is connected to God, connected to reality, I feel joy. For reality itself is joy. Joy is reality. So when I'm thinking of God, when I'm meditating on God, when I'm close to God, I feel joy. But if for whatever reason my mind strays from that source of bliss, from God, I should actually feel anguish because nothing can compare to that. It was a wonderful thing to notice. Nothing can compare to that joy. And so to be parted from that joy for even a heartbeat is an unbearable anguish. The only person who feels that anguish is a person who's felt that joy. So it's a great sign of bhakti, actually, to feel anguish, longing, separation. And the word is viraha. So you know what Narada says? Forget these definitions. Garga talking about God, sure. Shandilya enjoying the self-bliss, sure. Or Vyasa enjoying puja, sure. But can you cry like I cry? Can you really feel like I feel? Can you suffer like this? That's the question, actually. How much do you love God? The question is how much intense anguish you feel when you are parted from that reality. That's called vyakulata. Now, I want to bring up Ramakrishna here. So Narada himself used the word parama vyakulata, intense anguish. Ramakrishna's entire definition of real bhakti is vyakulata. Over and over in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, in Bengali, it's byakulata. Byakulat. I don't have the accent, but somebody who's Bengali here maybe could say it in the Bengali accent. It has more O's than A's in it. But like vyakulata in Sanskrit is bakulata. I think bokulata, something like that. But it means this. And it's interesting. The translator of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Nikhilanandaji, the greatest translation of all time, probably, for now at least, he translates this as, oh, Digambari is giving us a new word here. Can you pronounce this, Digambari? A very apropos word for me at this time in my life. What is it? Well, how do you pronounce it, Digambari? Do you know? I don't want to say, I've never heard this word before. Okay, yeah, I know. We will try. Okay, let me try a pronunciation, but any Koreans, maybe you can correct me. In-yun. In-yun. I-N-Y-U-N. So maybe a Korean who speaks can correct me. In-yun. It's a word in Korean, the Gambari is giving, that means providence or fate, but specifically about relationships between people. And she learned it from a movie called Past Lives, or like Cloud Atlas or something like that. Okay, we'll see that. We should do a screening. Today I don't have to, okay, I shouldn't say this with such joy because really I do like this job, but today I don't have to teach the middle schoolers at 8, so I get to hang out a little longer today. So that's why I'm just taking my time. So maybe we can do some screening or something later. We can watch maybe a wonderful interview, Anuradha Paudwal's interview. We saw a little bit of it. We can maybe see a bit. I don't know. We'll save that for later. But anyway, so what Ramakrishna seems to come back to again and again and again is this idea of bhyakulata, this intense, and Nikalandaji translates this as earnestness or eagerness. But really, I think the better translation would be, I mean, who am I to say it, but anguish. Maybe Nikhil felt like that would turn off some readers, but it's like this tremendous longing and anguish, and it's like this hair-pulling sense of, oh my God, I'm parted from you, and I can't bear it. That, according to Narada, is true bhakti. And you're like, okay, oh my God, who could be like this? Who could have this anguish for God? Who could dedicate their whole lives and everything to God? Can you think of somebody? Who could do this? And the answer is Caitanya. And the answer is Ramakrishna. The answer is perhaps Jesus. But of course, Narada cannot speak of Caitanya because that hasn't happened yet. Narada can't speak of Jesus, again, probably because that hasn't happened yet. And Narada can't speak of Ramakrishna because, again, that hasn't happened yet. Yeah, it is. And Dustin, you're right. A Buddhist critique here might be, you guys, this is just dukkha. Like, you know what the Buddhists might say here? You guys, you're just fetishizing a refined form of what we're calling dukkha. The purpose of spirituality is to be free of dukkha, not increase it. What nonsense bhakti. You're doing this and you're becoming sadder. Is that spirituality? No, come, practice Buddhism. There's no God. It's all void. Be peaceful. Shanta. So it's true. A Buddhist critique of this might be, okay, this is all quite busy and it's mind stuff and it's conceptual and it's all nonsense. So yeah, maybe this is dukkha, but it's categorically different. We argue in the Bhakti tradition, this kind of suffering is categorically different from other forms of suffering. Or like, what if you want God? So desire is a problem, right? We say desire creates attachment. But what about attachment to God? What about desire to God? Ramakrishna, people would ask this of Ramakrishna all the time. They would say, isn't desire for God just another desire? Isn't it bondage? Isn't it attachment? And his response, Dustin, is stunning. He says, you know, there are two types of candy. Apparently, there are two types of candy. One is called rock candy, and the other is just your regular garden variety candy. Ramakrishna says the garden variety candy causes acidity in the stomach. So I don't know about this whole Ayurvedic discussion. I don't know how true this is, but apparently regular candy makes your stomach acidic, but rock candy, whatever that is, actually quells the acid in the stomach. So they're both candy, but they're different. They're categorically different. So the desire for God is unlike any other desire we could have as human beings. It's categorically different, and it liberates us rather than binds us. So the problem is not desire. The problem is a particular kind of desire, avidya, shakti. And similarly, yeah, exactly. And similarly, this anguish, this suffering is not like other qualities, other kinds of suffering. It's a special kind of suffering, which is really a kind of joy. So I think that's an important question. Okay, so wonderful. So the next question we have to ask now is who could Narada point to as an example of this bhakti? And you know, we just talked about the Bhagavata Purana, and Narada, that's the first place he goes. He says, there are examples of this. Astyevam evam. Astyevam evam. There are examples of this bhakti. Oh my God, what time is it even? Oh, Devi, I have not in the sunlight seen you for a long time. Dharma, welcome. You're going to enjoy this. We're talking about some really like fucking ecstatic stuff, I think. Come see Madhu. Madhu is here. Madhu and Nora are here. Don't know if you saw Nora yet. But here comes Lalita. I feel like you guys, Vijay, you guys are early today, no?
It's also just the daylight saving.
Just because the sun is
Yeah,
out.
we are. We didn't eat dinner together. We brought it back here.
Oh, for once, you know, usually they'll go have a really nice dinner and then they'll come back and they'll tell me about the really nice dinner they have. And sometimes they'll just bring back like very, and I'm kidding. The last times you brought back better things. Anyway, Lalita knows everyone already, but I have some new friends here today who you might not have met. There's Dustin. Dustin is new, I think. You haven't met Dustin. There's Dustin. But there you can see Lala. Chakreshwara is there. See? Look at his shirt. What a great shirt. Daddy vibes. Yeah, Kuleshwari. Rebecca was just here. You couldn't see her, but there's Bhavani. Look at everyone. Everyone's here.
So beautiful. Aww.
And there's Nora. Do you know Nora, Lalita?
Yes, I
You know
do.
Nora? Okay, good. Yeah, I thought you met her. Okay, good. Okay, so who is a greater lover than Radha? That's the question we're asking. Who could be a greater lover than Radha? And Narada, he says, real devotion, what devotion looks like is anguish. Like you don't know love until you know the anguish of separation from your beloved. So that's love, right? And who is the example? Narada says there are examples. Because, it's not good actually to claim something without being able to demonstrate it, right? In philosophy, in anything, you should be able to show proof. And proof in spiritual life is the life. You have to show me a life in which this principle was practiced. Because 1 pound of practice is worth 10 cartloads of tall talk. Something like that, Swamiji said. Okay, so there are examples. And who? He says, Yata Vraja Gopikanam. Gopi, the gopis of Raja. So Narada's go-to, just like Caitanya, just like Ramakrishna, seems to be this Leela, this Rasa Leela, in which the gopis fell in love with Krishna in the forest of Raja. This is something interesting. Here, Caitanya would disagree. So I just want to point out. So we pointed out a similarity, right? All of them liked this Rasa Leela. And also, you should know that Ramakrishna would go crazy if anybody sang any gopi songs. He himself practiced for a long time in the mood of Radha. And one thing that's really interesting about this is he would go all the way. Remember we talked about Raganuga Bhakti? I told you, right? Like in that lecture, there are 3 stages of Bhakti. 3 stages of Bhakti. The first type of Bhakti is called Vaidhi Bhakti, where you just follow rules. And the rule is you do puja every day, smell the prasad flowers, eat the prasad food, drink the charanamrita, dance before God. It's a rule. Don't dance because you feel like it. The book says you must dance before your Lord or your lady. Dance before God. Sing to God. Reveal your most intimate feelings to God. These are all the rules of conventional bhakti, it's called. Bhakti with rules. And in that lecture at Chaitanya's house, which tragically you could not come, I think that was the best lecture of my whole life. I just want to make sure that I give it to you one day because it was really a discussion of like what bhakti looks like in practice, but as per like the outer court of bhakti. You just do rules, right? You just but then through this external rules, the external rule following, comes this deep inward psychological state where you actually start to have a relationship with God. Now you know that God is real, you start to have an actual personal relationship with God. So God is the beloved, God is the friend, capital F, or God as the child, like baby Krishna, or God as is that a chai?
Thai iced tea. Do you want it? How?
Yeah, thank you. I got excited. It's Thai. Good. So God as the beloved, God as the mother, God as the child, God as the so much for religion, right? I'm having a nice high-flying conversation about bhakti, and I'm like, is that a sense pleasure? Fuck, Maya. Got me again. There goes the day sadhana. Okay, I'm kidding. You're like running on the gym. Yeah, God is a cup of chai. That's the problem, right? When the chai is not God, but God is chai. Those are 2 very different statements. Okay, brace yourself. I'm about to get a lot of caffeine and sugar. Hang on tight. Here we go. Okay, I'm kidding. So, this idea. After you get Raganuga Bhakti, then you get Ragatmika Bhakti. But the difference between Raganuga Bhakti and Ragatmika Bhakti, as we talked about in that lecture, is one is imitation and one is the real thing. So once this inner psychological disposition arises, I should have a relationship with God. Once that comes, then the next step is to actualize it. So Ramakrishna, when he was practicing the Radha Leela, he would wear a sari. This is very important. And Vijaya knows what's coming because I'm like obsessed with this particular thing. But he would wear a sari, he would wear jewelry, and he would be indistinguishable from any woman. And people would mistake him as a woman. He was so passing as a cross-dressing Radha that he would hang out with women and nobody would even know that he was a man. And he's so identified with being Radha that he menstruated, which is the secret to the stigmata. It's a really interesting thing. Ramakrishna, who is in a male body, experienced menstruation because he wholly identified, thank you, Devi, with being a woman. And that's what it means to practice Raganuga Bhakti. And of course, for him, because he was so into it, it was very easily Ragatmika Bhakti. So he practiced as Radha. And naturally, then in later years, he would go wild if anybody sang any gopi songs because he really identified himself with the gopis and with their feeling of love for Krishna, this all-consuming love for Krishna. So Ramakrishna was fond of the Rasa Leela, this erotic divine relationship between Krishna and the gopis. Narada references it as the ultimate example of bhakti. There was never a bhakta as the gopis of Raja. And Caitanya premises his whole religion on it. He himself is, after all, Krishna in the form of Radha. But, and here's an interesting point. Here's the difference. Remember, in Caitanya, we're supposed to forget about God's greatness. Remember, the whole premise of Caitanya Bhakti is mamatva. God should be your very own. God is mine. And think about this. A judge, a high court judge, has the power to make or break lives in that time in India. A high court British colonial, judge like that. But to that judge's wife, to that judge's child, he's just dad. He's just my baby. You forget all about his greatness and the position of his office and his power because he's your very own. So true love is intimacy. It's when there's no high or low. You don't put a person on a pedestal anymore. In a sense, you actually forget how great they are. Sometimes you're stunned. You remember. You're like, oh my God, my baby is actually really awesome. But because of love, what's more important is your sweetness, your intimacy, your immediacy. So this is where I think Narada and Caitanya might disagree. Narada is now about to do some apologetics because you might be like, wait, what? The gopis? But they were just debauched, hedonist, right? Like they were just adulterers. Like, what do you mean the gopis were the greatest bhaktas of all time? That is actually a critique that we hear from people. So what does Narada say? He says, no, you guys, even there, tatrapi na mahatmya jnana vismrityapavadaha. There's here the word apavadaha, like nama paradha, seva paradha, like that. Apavadaha means problem or blame. This was not problematic. Why? This relationship was not problematic because there was no problem of forgetting. Vismitri, forgetting God's greatness, mahatmya. So the gopis never forgot that Krishna was God. They always remembered that Krishna was God. So they were always aware of God's greatness, and they were aware that they were entering into a romantic relationship, not with a boy, with a regular cute fella, but with God himself, manifest as a cute fella, right? But they never forgot that it was God. I find that appealing, but Caitanya would say, no, you should forget about God's greatness, actually, his Mahatmya quality. If you're thinking about the Mahatmya quality, you're in Ramanuja's camp, and you're interested in like Vishnu Narayana, this majestic being, and your love for God is this like awe, But no, your love for God should be intense and personal, and a personal love doesn't care about who God really is. Yashoda does not care that Krishna is the master of the universe. Yashoda will tie that fellow to a pole if he so much as misbehaves a little bit. He stole butter from the neighbor's house. I have to tie him to a pole. That happened. And that's what love looks like, tying God to a pole. Right? So I think this is where maybe Caitanya would disagree a little bit from Narada about God's greatness. Then this next thing is really good. And he goes, without that knowledge, they would just be adulterers. Tad vihinam Jaranamiva. So Narada again is being apologetic here. He's like, well, you see, this is the difference. I'm not saying adultery is good. I'm saying the gopis' adultery is good. Right? Narada is making that claim. But why? And he says, because they have the knowledge of God's greatness. So for them, it's spiritual, which is an interesting thing. And then he defines what makes this really holy, really special is this. Nastyeva tasmin tat sukha sukitvam. Even in this love, in this illicit love, there is not happiness in the beloved's happiness. Wait, no, the object of that love is the tatsukha, the joy of that beloved. So let me explain this a little bit. I think maybe the translation is. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the translation is pretty good, actually. There is not happiness in the beloved's happiness. So like basically what they're saying is that this is selfless. So most of the time, remember, I had this whole spiel, right, when we did this verse some time ago about Vivekananda's sanctified shopkeeping. Most of us, when we enter relationships, all we're doing is transacting with somebody. We're saying, you give me this, I give you that, we're in a relationship. And if you stop giving me this, and if you change, then we're no longer in a relationship. So relationships are a kind of transaction. Because we're looking for our own happiness, and we think that we can get our own happiness through someone else. And they're looking for their own happiness, and so we are a mutual partnership looking for each other's happiness. But still, our own happiness is important here. Whereas the love of Radha was so all-consuming that she forgot herself in that love. She lost herself in Krishna. So there's no question about her own happiness. So what we hear in this very profound Rasa Leela is like these stories of self-sacrifice in a sense, but it's interesting because in doing that, she gets the greatest joy. And Krishna does the same. He totally self-sacrifices to her, and she totally self-sacrifices to him. And there's this wonderful sense of joy in surrender, joy in self-forgetfulness. I could probably do an hour on just this because we can talk about Kundalini Shakti and the flow of Kundalini Shakti towards egoic identification and the redirection of that flow towards transpersonal identity as a matter of identity. There's a whole science and mystery behind what it is to lose yourself in God. What does it mean for the drop to become an ocean? There's a whole science behind that, a tantric science. But we'll leave that for now. I want to say some juicier things before we end the lecture. We're getting close to the end of the lecture, so let me just get into some juicier things. So we have this whole thing. Narada obviously really loves it. This bhakti that was expressed by the gopis for Krishna, with some differences from Caitanya. Ramakrishna and Caitanya really loved it. So let me talk a little bit about Ramakrishna. So he liked this idea of the illicit lover, the idea of a paramour. And here's the idea. It's more intense because there's greater risk. There's a taboo to it, and it could ruin your whole life. And so there's more to lose. And if you were to pursue something like that, because you have more to lose, it requires greater courage. And where would you get that courage if not an intense love? The courage to say, my whole life could be ruined, but it's okay because I'm lost in the rapture of love. So that's a higher love, actually, than any other love we could enjoy. And there's a whole thing where Caitanya proves this. He proves that the Maturiya Bhava includes all the other bhavas. Because in your paramour, in your illicit lover, there is a perfect mother or father. There is a perfect child. There is a perfect friend. There is a perfect master. You serve your paramour. You're your paramour's slave. You know what is, and Britney Spears, of course, she embodied this in that song. She's a slave, right? So Radha is a slave for Krishna, a perfect slave. Krishna is her master, but also Krishna is her friend. There's perfect equality between lovers. Perfect equality. Friends, pals, they can count on each other. They can share companionable silence. They can laugh together. They're friends. They can do things together like friends would. They can watch movies together. It's a wonderful thing. Friends. Then third thing is, but Krishna is also Radha's child. Radha like mothers him in a way. But Krishna is Radha's father also, in a sense. So they have a parental relationship. So you go up to Vatshalya. But you know what? Mathurya is even higher because it's all of that and so much more. It's all of that plus one more level of romance, one more level of intimacy, right? Like that sexual, erotic, romantic intimacy is something that includes other things like motherly love, like friendly love, like, but it encompasses that, yeah, also. So it includes it, but transcends that. Yes, it includes all the love, but transcends that. So this Mathurya, Chaitanya thought was the highest thing, and Ramakrishna was really fond of this. He was like, look, can you love God like that? And then he would give this example. He's like, imagine there's a housewife, okay, and she has a paramour. What does she do all day long? She thinks of her paramour, even while she's washing dishes, even while she's raising her husband's children, even while she's talking to her husband, even while she's making love to her husband. Where is her mind? Her mind is always with her paramour. She only thinks about her beloved while she's in the middle of her life, right? For this point, Ramakrishna was very excited. Like what is that? Snape wives? Snape, like Severus Snape from Lord of the Rings? No, sorry, what from Harry Potter? What are the Snape wives?
There's an online, I don't know much about it, but there's an online phenomena where like women believe that they're astral projecting and making love to Snape or something like that. And they're like, I wish I had more details for you, but that's a real thing. And then like they imagine that like their real life lovers, like their husbands, are possessed by Severus Snape.
I love chaos, and my day was so chaotic, but never would I have expected in the course of a Nārada Bhakti Sūtra lecture to have been told what you just told me. What the
The
fuck?
internet is a horrible place.
R.I.P. Alan Rickman. Wait. So people find Snape. Okay, I guess I can see it. I just never thought about it that way. This is the first time I'm thinking of Severus Snape from Harry Potter as like a sex symbol. I've never once thought about that, and that's what's blowing my mind right now. Snape wives.
I don't mean to besmirch the name of
Okay,
Alan.
yeah, right. Let's not take the Lord's name in vain. Fuck. Yeah, they're pulling his soul for that. I don't think he minds too much, I imagine. But okay, yeah, like that. Do you know about this Snape wives?
This is the first time hearing of
Yeah. Yes, have you heard of it? Like,
I
whoa.
haven't been on mine in a while.
Are you a Snape wife?
Plead the fifth.
Okay, so anyway, yes, exactly. Exactly this. So yeah, so even while they're making love to their husband, they're thinking of Snape. Yeah, what Harry Potter wife are you? Oh, Laleshwari. Today I'm gonna sit in meditation later. This is probably what's going to be there. No. So yeah, so this idea of like Sri Ramakrishna, these are the seeds of what would later become Vivekananda's Karma Yoga, because Vivekananda's Karma Yoga is not Karma Yoga, right? Not really. It's seeing God in each and every moment as this imminent manifest world. Like all these people, the 23 people who are in the room, look at them now. They're God. Don't fuck around. They're God. You will have no God but this. Affirm that to yourself. There is no God but this Danny. Look at Danny. That is God. You must know it. Danny is God. That's Vivekananda's religion, right? There's no God other than Danny. And once you know that, now you can practice Jnana Yoga. So Vivekananda's Karma Yoga is very exalted, that this person is God. And one step lower than that is Karma Yoga, where everything you do with God consciousness. So you don't get like when you're doing things, you can sometimes forget God. You get into the busyness of life. But if you could remember Snape in each and every moment, I guess that's the idea. So Ramakrishna liked this like Krishna Radha illicit lover thing, because he would say, like, even while she's doing her household duties, her mind is with her lover, her paramour, her taboo relationship. Like that's what she's thinking about. And so we should approach God like that. We should have this relationship to God, where God is your secret thing. You know, like I'm so in love with my Ishta, I'm so in love with Kali that I just can't wait to come home and do puja, or I just can't wait to see her later at night when I'm alone at my altar. I just can't wait to chant her mantras, or inwardly I'm just chanting her mantras and thinking about her. And it's like, have you ever had a crush in school? And you're crushing. Suddenly, like the test didn't matter anymore. You would get back a failed test and you'd be like, whatever, because inwardly you're crushing. And it's so wonderful. Like you could have all these deadlines and you could be afraid of this and afraid of that, but it's okay because inwardly you have a crush. You know, it's nice. Inwardly, there's this current of joy. You think about your crush, you feel nice. That's how God should be. You should crush on God. Yeah, whole sophomore year, right? See, Danny, God himself knows exactly what we're talking about. Like whole studies, I had this crush, and like the year is just great. And you know what? Maybe you never talk to her or him or them, right? Maybe, but just thinking about them makes you happy. You know, I remember when I was in, I think you guys, Americans would call it middle school, maybe. I was like 13, maybe 13 or 14, like that, middle school. I was in middle school. And in our system, it's just called secondary school. So once you graduate from primary school, you go to secondary school. And it's like, I think it's all the way up to what you might call 11th or 12th grade, 11th grade, I think. So I think it's like 8th grade through to, no, 9th grade through to 11th or 12th grade or something like that. Anyway, so I was in the first form, which would be, I think, like 8th grade or 9th grade. And there was this girl, her name was Cassandra, and she was in high school. She was 11th grade or something like that. And she played in this band called the Toaster Things. And like she would like, you know, that the tall, like she's so high above me, like Cleopatra, Joan of Arc, or Aphrodite. She was that for me. Like my young prepubescent self. Like she fronted this band, and there was a bass player, there was a drummer, and she fronted this band, and she had this like big dark hair. She was like, basically she was Marceline, you know, the vampire queen. And I saw her do Nirvana's "Smells Like Teen Spirit" at like a high school talent show, and I was like, you know, like young Nisha's sexual awakening. I'm just like, I never really, you know, like I never needed to talk to her really. Like yeah, right, Melissa, you'd fallen in love. Like for that whole year, for like 2 years, there was this constant joy in my heart just to think of Cassandra. I was like, oh, you know what's really interesting though? I was once debating at Stanford. I was at a debate tournament in Stanford, and I just had this weird feeling of like, fuck this whole debating thing. And I went into this church at Stanford. So random. This is such a random thing in my life. I went into this church It was raining heavily. So I went to the church and I was sitting there. I was the only one in the church, and the church choir was practicing and it was beautiful. And I was just in Stanford, in the church, Stanford church, just thinking about my life, right? And then it's I think around Lent time. And suddenly the room starts to fill. People start coming into the church, and then a preacher comes, and I'm like, oh my God, there's about to be a sermon actually. And it was in the evening, so I was surprised. It's gonna be a sermon. I get up and I listened to a bit of the sermon, but then I have to go. So I get up, and no offense to the guy giving the sermon, I think it was great. It was about Matthew. I still distinctly remember it's about Jesus being tempted by the devil in the book of Matthew, like that. So I get up and I'm walking out. And as I walk out of the Stanford church, Cassandra Mary Dennis walks into the Stanford church. I was like, Cassie? She was like, Nish? It was the craziest thing in my life, right? So wild. Anyway, never saw her or spoke to her again, but that was just like sudden, like a weird kind of, I still doubt that it happened in reality. Anyway, that was weird. You are. Okay, so, but like this long digression, elaborate story about young 30-year-old Nish's high school crushes. Like the point here is to say, you don't even have to talk to them. You don't even have to know them. And if I never met her in a church, it would be okay, because in that year, as Danny is pointing out, you think about them and it makes the whole school year better. You're excited to go to school, actually. You would wake up in the morning and like listen to like stupid sappy music and be like, oh my God, I'm excited because I might like make eye contact with her during the assembly in which we're all reciting stuffily the national anthem, and like it was so exciting. It was exciting to be in love. Have that for God, Ramakrishna is saying. We feel that for your spiritual life. Then there's that passion, and as you go through your day, as you're doing mundane things, inwardly there's that awareness, that God awareness is always there. That's what I'm looking forward to. It's a wonderful feeling. And it can be like some people have a hobby that they really love. Like maybe some people play music or paint and they work boring office jobs, but their life is blessed because inwardly they're thinking of their creative career. It doesn't have to be a person, it could be an activity. But if you have that thing, your own thing, your secret thing, and it's what lights you on fire, it's what turns you on, inwardly that's what you love, then it doesn't matter. Your whole life can be something other than that, but you'll always feel that joy. So Ramakrishna would talk about this illicit lover thing quite a bit. Okay, wow, someone put the Snape. Oh no. Okay, I see it. He's like goth daddy, I guess, in a sense. I see why you all. So, okay, so now we have this idea. Okay, so all of these people, they agree on this. But let me close this lecture now by talking a little bit about Kashmir Shaivism. Yeah, that's what Chakreshwara's shirt should say. It says daddy vibes, but because it's got like Satan on it, Satan is the ultimate goth daddy. There's a line that I really like in a Korn song in Twisted Transistor. He says, hey you, devil's little sister. What a beautiful line. And I'm like, oh, that's my dating history. Devil's little sister. But Chakra is wearing a shirt right now. It's got Baphomet on it. And it says daddy vibes. I look at that shirt, I'm like, mommy vibes. Like, okay, so there we go. So let's put the Bhakti Sutra aside for a moment. So I think we have this, I think, in common. Nārada, Rāmakrishna, and Caitanya were all deeply interested in the passionate Mathura Bhava, Rasa Leela kind of thing. Okay. But here's where they all differ. I'll just say this, and we talked already about this on Monday to some extent, but I'll just quickly sketch it out so that we can move on to something interesting. Shaivism and the comparison between Shiva Shakti and Krishna Radha. So here's where they differ. According to Caitanya Deva, God is Krishna in his highest aspect. So absolutely speaking, God is Krishna. Narada would not say that. Nowhere does Narada actually tell you who or what God is. Narada does not say God has form, nor does Narada say God is formless. Narada leaves the question of God blank. It's like fill in the blanks here. Sa tu asmin parama prema rupaha. Remember, the point of this lecture is to put all three of these people in the ring together and have them wrestle. That's kind of, that was my concept for this lecture. What if Ramakrishna, Narada, and Caitanya all had a debate with one another? What would happen? Epic rap battles of history. That was my vibe going into this lecture. And I thought about it, I was like, it would just turn into, I was going to say philosophical cuddle party, but that might not be appropriate. It would turn instead into just a kirtan. The three of them, if they got into the ring, they wouldn't debate. They would just all delight in the name of God, which is where I wanted this lecture to go. But I want to point out some differences, just some tensions, so that you can see the uniqueness of each of these schools. So the first thing is this. Narada does not say God is Krishna. right? He doesn't say God is not Krishna, but he certainly doesn't say God is Krishna. He says, Sa tu asmin parama prema rupaha. Yep. Atato bhaktim vyakyasyamaha. Now I'm going to tell you about bhakti. Atato, I'm going to tell you about bhakti. Bhakti is supreme love. Parama prema, it's the form. Parama prema rupaha, it's like. He doesn't even say it is. It's like supreme love for what? For this. Sa tu asmin parama prema. And tu asmin is in Sanskrit a neuter. It's not a man, it's not a woman. Do you know about Snape wives? Yeah, okay, see? Okay, I'm not alone. Everyone knows about this thing where apparently women will have sex with their husbands and then astral project themselves to where they can have sex with Snape, or they would invite Snape's body to possess the.
Harry Potter?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But I apparently.
So crazy.
Yeah, I'm trying to talk about Nārada. I'm trying to talk about Caitanya. Huh?
It's fucked up.
It's fucked. That's fucked. No, it's not. Why are we king shaming? That's not the right attitude to have here. It's all great. He's the master of the dark arts. No, you guys, you have to know this trope, okay? Yeah, is that the next week lecture? You have to know this trope. Once I was Vijay and I were in a boba place. We were standing in line to get boba. I know, I have a problem, a tea problem. But we were standing in line to get boba. And then this high schooler, this like kind of like angsty high schooler kid, he storms into the boba place and he's like, hey, you know, in that high schooler voice where they're actually prepubescent, so the voice is high, but they try to make it low. He's like, hey, do you guys have a bathroom? Do you guys have a bathroom? You know, and then the sweet person at the counter was like, no public restroom. And the boy stops like this and he goes, that's fucked. And then he turns around and walks out. And so now, whenever something is fucked, we say that. That's fucked. That's the bit. That's fucked. Anyway, you guys. So we put Nārada, Caitanya, and Ramakrishna in the ring. And we're gonna have them wrestle. Let's see what happens. Caitanya says Krishna is God. Krishna absolutely is God. And you know, derailed it a little bit, but no, I'm back. The train is back on the track, and we're gonna bring it into the train station. Okay, we're about to land this thing. So Nārada, and Caitanya for a moment. Caitanya says the absolute form of God is Krishna, and the argument is brilliant. He says if you think God is formless, that's inferior to thinking God has form. You guys, stop. The Harry Potter, like, you know, what house are you? What is it like? Are you a Slytherin? Are you a Vijay makes this joke. She goes, you're not a Hufflepuff, Nish. You're 28. She's like, you're not a Ravenclaw, Catherine. You're 36. You're not a Slytherin, James. You're a father to your fucking 3 kids. Okay, you guys. Yeah, you guys. So, Krishna Chaitanya, he says, Krishna is the highest form of God. And not only that, Krishna with form. Krishna has a formless aspect. In the Vyoma, you know, Parama Vyoma, there's Vishnu Narayana, and that's a lower form of Krishna, actually, the majestic aspect of Krishna. And Krishna has definitely a Nirguna aspect, but it's Tanubha. It's an external splendor. It's a peripheral splendor. Right? It's like not really his real joy. And the argument is subtle. Say I knew Lalita, right? Like I know Lalita, but I don't know what Lalita looks like. I don't know what she likes, what she dislikes. I don't know what she sounds like. I know nothing about her fashion sense. Medanandaji apparently knows much about. I know nothing about anything about Lalita. Can I say that I know Lalita? Notice, if I say I know Lalita in a vague and abstract, formless way, that cannot really be called knowledge. So why then is knowledge of the formless God called knowledge? How can it be jnana when you know God only indiscriminately and formlessly and amorphously? That's not knowledge. What a beautiful argument. So Krishna Chaitanya says, you know what real knowledge looks like? Not nirvikalpaka, as per the Advaita Vedanta tradition, but savikalpaka. God must have form. For God to be lovely and adorable and personal, and for God to be known, you have to know God in a form. Savikalpaka, formal knowledge, is in every case higher than informal knowledge. So we must know God in that way, right? But how do we know God's Krishna? They insist upon it. They say the Bhagavata book says that the religion of the Bhagavata, by the way, is the religion of the Vedas. They say the Bhagavata is the correct interpretation of the Vedas, and according to the Bhagavata, it's Krishna, 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 Krishna. And even Vishnu is an emanation of Krishna. Krishna is the highest. And Krishna looks like this. He's a very attractive, dark-skinned boy with shoulder-length curly hair, with wildflowers in his hair, and with the saffron robe. It's very clear what Krishna looks like. with a flute to his lips. There's a beautiful gopi song I like. Oh, may I be, Krishna, may you be my nose ring so you can always be touching my lips. Oh, Krishna, may you be my amulet so you can always be nestled between my breast. Oh, Krishna, may you always be my lipstick or something like that. My rouge, so you can always, so I may always be kissing you. Or Krishna, may you be my, like, it's ideas, of how I wish Krishna was this item or that item. So there are gopi songs that talk about Krishna in this formless way. But when they say this, they have in mind a particular form. So Caitanya says, true religion, I mean, everything else is okay, but it's not the highest. True religion is worshipping Krishna in that particular form as Radha, or being like a gopi. But not so with Narada. Narada does not define what tu asmin should mean. God is neither a man nor a woman, form nor formless. It's up to you. You can decide what God is. Ramakrishna was exactly the same way. He would love the gopi songs and he would love Vaishnavas, but he would constantly tell people the stuff can be bigoted. Like, don't think your way alone is right. He would say a lot of this material is good, but it has some bigoted ideas. And Sri Ramakrishna didn't like that. So God should be whatever, It doesn't have to be Ramakrishna, doesn't have to be Caitanya, it doesn't have to be anybody. Whatever you want. Your own conception. And the AA people, they really took this to heart and they said, it's the God of your own understanding, which I love. So we can choose an Ishta. And you should understand, whatever Ishta you choose, that Ishta is the ultimate reality. Because God can have many forms and all of these forms are equally valid. So this is how Ramakrishna and Narada disagree with Caitanya with regards to absolute reality. Like I said on Monday, Ramakrishna stressed that absolute reality is both formless and with form. He didn't say the formless nirguna aspect is subordinate to the form aspect. He would instead say that they're both equal aspects of one reality, like a snake still or wriggling, like an ocean calm or wavy. There's not that one is better than the other, or one is different than the other, or one is a peripheral brilliance of the other, nothing like that. Formless reality, pure awareness, God nirguna aspect, and form reality, God saguna, whether nirakara or sakara, those terms we explored on Monday, all of them are various readings of one reality, which you are. So the next step I want to say, and this closing step I want to say, is that one of the biggest disagreements, I think, between Ramakrishna and the other schools is on the issue of non-duality. Like, how far do you go with non-duality? And it seems like Ramakrishna, at least if you take the Vivekananda interpretation seriously, is much more of a non-dualist than Caitanya. Caitanya insists on there being some distinction between the jivas and God. Ramakrishna loves that. He explores that distinction because it allows him to be a bhakta. He says, when I feel like I'm a body, using the Hanuman thing, Nina, Nora and Madhu are going to see Nina tomorrow. So they'll hear some Hanuman Chalisa. You're actually going to see Nina Rao. They're going to Fairfax. They're going to watch Nina. And so she'll sing the Hanuman Chalisa. And Hanuman is famous for saying, when I am a body, I am the servant and you, Rama, are the master. But when I am a mind, you, Rama, are the whole and I am the part. But when I am pure consciousness, you and I are one. And obviously, Sri Ramakrishna is very fond of that. He could be a great bhakta, dualistically, a great qualified non-dualist. But ultimately, I think in his ultimate understanding, God has become the 24 cosmic principles. God abides as all the jivas. It's not that God is in everyone. God is everyone. And he would say, he saw people as God and he worshipped people as God. I don't think Caitanya could have gone so far. I don't think Caitanya would have worshipped his wife, for instance, as God. People worship Caitanya as God, but Caitanya might not have worshipped like regular people as God. Ramakrishna did, right? So he actually saw people as God. So this is the difference. In the Caitanya camp, Krishna is uniquely God, and Krishna's Jiva Shakti is responsible for the manifestation of souls. And those souls could either be drawn into Krishna's Maya Shakti or drawn into Krishna's Swarupa Shakti. In the latter case, these souls can become parikaras or attendants, and they can enjoy the nuptial bliss of Rasa Leela, but on the outskirts. They can graduate, but they can never be Radha. Whereas, according to Ramakrishna, you already are Radha. Nothing exists but the Divine Mother. So I think it's a bit stronger of a non-duality. So the idea is we never really got to talk about unique elements in Caitanya that we don't find anywhere else. And one thing that Caitanya stressed that we don't really get in Bhakti traditions, you notice this, look at any Bhakti tradition, most of them will have this one element missing. Caitanya and Ramakrishna included it. What do you think it is? Think about Christianity, generally speaking, Islam, generally speaking, not Sufism or Christian mysticism, just general Islam, general Christianity. Think of any general, any kind of Guru Yoga tradition. There's Bhakti. It's a tradition of Bhakti. What's one thing that's usually not spoken about in these contexts? What do you think it is? I mean, love for God, no doubt. God as having many different forms, no doubt. Harmony of all religions, usually in this day and age. prayer, singing, arati, all of that's included. Some of them include that also. But there's one element, a tantric element, that bhakti traditions usually leave out that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kept. What is it? What do you think it could be? A tantric element that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu felt was important that we don't usually talk about in bhakti. What do you think? Okay. Well, the answer, it's this. Guru, the emphasis on the guru and emphasis on diksha. I didn't mention this in that lecture we had about Chaitanya's practice, and that was a great loss, because one unique thing in Chaitanya's presentation of bhakti is he stresses the necessity of a human guru. And he says there are three types. Remember, bhakti traditions don't like this because God is God, right? Why should I come to a man, a human? Right? Bhakti traditions are usually kind of allergic. And if there is a human, it's a great saint. And that great saint has disciples, but that disciple, that guru-student relationship is not often stressed in most bhakti. Like Christianity, very rarely, your pastor is not really your guru, as it were. So what does a guru do? A guru initiates. And in this tradition, there are three levels of initiation. The first one is called diksha. This is where you receive the name of Krishna, usually with some bij mantra, very tantric, right? And of course, it's Bengal, the home of Tantra. One of the various forms of Tantra. And the second one is a Shiksha Guru. So the Shiksha Guru doesn't necessarily have to be a Diksha Guru, but it's a Guru that teaches you about Bhakti, like how to practice Bhakti, might expound on the Bhagavatam for you, give you like lectures on this or like that. So we might call Sadguru and Upaguru, not Sadguru, on YouTube. But Sadguru meaning your personal teacher who gives you your mantra might actually be different from your Upaguru. You might learn a lot from your Upaguru that you don't learn from your Sadguru. In fact, you might have only seen your Sadguru once in your life. It happens, in India, you get initiated, you get your mantra from your Sadguru, and that's the last you ever hear of them. It happens a lot, actually. But, you won't be lost for long. Soon an Upaguru will come. And the Upaguru might not give you a new mantra. Why should they? You already have a mantra. You're already initiated. But the Upaguru might instruct you in meditation, in puja, and all of those things. In some cases, if you're really lucky, your Sadguru is your Upaguru as well. If you're really lucky, the two can be one. And if you're really, really lucky, your Diksha Guru, your Siksha Guru, and your Chaitanya Guru is one. In fact, I argue if you're unlucky, because I think we should have a lot of teachers. I think you're safer if you don't get Hinduism from your Guru, as Bhajananda said, but get your Guru from Hinduism. There's a distinction. Your Guru should not be Hinduism or Buddhism or anything. They should be, the difference? You can see the difference? Because one can easily become idiosyncratic cult-like deference to a man or a woman or a person. The other is checked and balanced within the context of a tradition. So I think it's good if we have a lot of Upagurus, because everyone teaches a unique approach and we should learn from everyone. Like Abhinava Gupta had 19 gurus, Ramakrishna had 16, like that. We should have a lot of Upagurus. But generally in the Bhakti tradition, we say don't take more than one Sadguru. Because the power of initiation, sometimes you do an injustice to your initiation if you take another Diksha into another mantra. That's one of the big no-nos in not just Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but also in Tantra. Don't make more Sadgurus. Have one Sadguru, get that mantra, then that's your deity, that's your Ishta. And then importantly, have lots of Upagurus. That I think is a better approach. But there's a third type of Guru, Chaitanya says, and that's the Chaitanya Guru. He's not talking about himself. He's saying sometimes there is a type of teacher who can do something for you that the Diksha Guru can't, and even the Siksha Guru can't. Siksha Guru can reveal practices, but they might not necessarily reveal the esoteric meaning of those practices. So the Chaitanya Guru might not have given you a mantra, nor might they have given you any instruction, but they reveal the inner meaning of that instruction, like Shams and Rumi, So like that. So the idea is Chaitanya Guru is something else, something secret, and it's in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, it's spoken about. Okay, so I think that's kind of cool. I don't really want to talk about Seva, Paradha, or Nama, Paradha, because ultimately I'm a Shaiva and I can't really relate to ideas of like rules and offenses and things like that, which is wonderful. In Bhakti traditions, they love rules and stuff, and that's great, but it's just a different bhav, We're a little... So I just want to close with this idea of, so how does this compare to Shiva Shakti? The last thing we promised to talk about. So we talked about some of the similarities. Remember, the similarities are this. They're all ecstatic lovers of God. Narada, Caitanya, and Ramakrishna are ecstatic lovers of God. They themselves never really formed philosophies. Ramakrishna left Vivekananda to form his philosophy. Right? Caitanya left the Goswamis to form his philosophy. So I don't think we should accuse them of the various things that their philosophies propose. Right? They were just lovers of God, content to be absorbed in the bliss of devotion. So we're not really talking about Ramakrishna, Chaitanya, and Narada. We're just talking about the philosophical interpretations that arose inspired by their lives, post their advent. In any case, what they all had in common was that they loved God. so intensely, and they loved God in this particular Mathurya Bhava, or rather they loved God in many ways, but they saw that Mathurya Bhava as particularly exalted. Ramakrishna, the difference here is that he liked this Parivatsalya, it's called, where he saw himself as the child of God. That was his main mode. Although he practiced all the modes, his unique mode was I am mother's child, like that. And he prescribed that as a very safe and good path. Okay, but what about Shaivism though? What's the difference between Shiva Shakti and Krishna Radha? The difference is just this: you're Shiva. It's simply that. You're not Krishna. You know, if you go and look at my TikTok comments or my Instagram comments, you'll see that Gaudiya Vaishnavas are very passionate, it's very good, but the one thing they cannot stand is the claim that you are God. That's just it, like that's a nama bharada. How can you be God? Can't even pay your taxes. Can't even turn in your green card paperwork in on time. How can you be God? Like, what kind of God are you? You can't even digest milk. So what kind of God is that? So this idea that you can't be God. Krishna is God and Radha is God. Radha is the energy of God. You are a particularization of Krishna's essence nature, a diversification of his being, and therefore you, like in a Ramanuja sense, are a spark from a big bonfire. Don't claim to be the bonfire. And that's better actually, because if you are God, what relationship can you have? I mean, arguably the relationship with Radha, but never mind. You know, it's better to be separate from God, to taste sugar rather than be sugar. And Advaita Vedanta says, no, be sugar. And what Kashmir Shaivism or Kaulatrika is saying is very unique. It's saying, be sugar, but remember that sugar is special because it can taste itself. That's the unique thing we get in this tradition. Sugar can taste itself because Prakasha has Vimarsha. Okay, so you are God, literally you. Right now, in this moment, as I'm speaking to you, as you're speaking to me, you are Shiva. There is only one reality. So the difference is that Shaiva non-duality is very hardcore non-duality. Like Ramanuja and acintya bhedābedha are wonderful forms of duality, but there's some bheda involved. And so too in Kashmir Shaivism, there's some bheda, but it's more of an emphasis on that abheda, that underlying oneness. So it's unity in diversity, but the diversity is recognized as nothing but a manifestation and an encounter with that one unity. So you are God. And so what does it mean for Shiva to love Shakti? Very simply, Shiva is pure consciousness. The energy of that consciousness is called Shakti, and it's Shiva's ability to experience the fullness of his being, which he otherwise would not be able to do without Shakti. So if Shiva didn't have Shakti or Icha, Shiva is then Shava. The whole idea now is the eros of Shiva is a little different from the eros of Radha and Krishna. The eros of Radha and Krishna is about this like self-sacrifice into one another, and it's a self-contained thing, and it maintains its duality throughout, and it's inaccessible by people in the outer circle. So the gopis only support Radha. The gopis' role in this whole Leela is to make meet cutes between Radha and Krishna. And they delight in that. They delight in playing a selfless, supportive role for Radha. Right? And they're different from Radha. And the jivas delight in imitating the gopis so they can be in the outer circle and enjoy that Rasa Leela. It's wonderful. But here in the Shaiva tradition, the difference is this. Shiva and Shakti is as follows. There's Shiva, and this whole world is Shakti. And every time Shiva sees it, it's something new. This is remarkable, that the purpose of creation is for Shiva to realize a new aspect of himself, which is what she's showing him in each moment. She's inseparable from him, but she's showing him something new in each moment. And so Shiva experiences his world with wide-eyed, rapturous wonder, and he recognizes that everything in this world is equally Shakti. So here's another difference. In the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, there's a stratification and a hierarchicalization of Shakti, with Swarupa Shakti being privileged over Maya Shakti. All of it is Shakti. Krishna has 3 Shaktis, but Maya Shakti is a problem actually for us jivas because it's bondage. But not so in Shaivism. In Shaivism, Maya is not a problem, it's an opportunity. It's, as we learned, Devi Maya Shakti is the Svatantriya, the freedom of the Lord to play this game with himself. So the fundamental difference, I think, is a different attitude towards purity and impurity. In Gaudiya Vaishnavism, there's more of an emphasis on that which is pure and that which is impure. Swarupa Shakti versus Maya Shakti, right? Radha, what is called, what's her name? Nitya Radha, I think, versus Kama Radha, like that. Whereas in Shaivism, there's no pure, impure. Everything is equally God. You know, when you can eat another's feces with relish, I'll call you a Shaiva, right? Like that's the idea. Like in Shaivism, it's such radical non-duality that you want to lick the urinal and cry in joy because you just kissed your God. That's Shaivism, you guys. It's like absolutely batshit crazy non-duality. It's a smashan religion. It's not like a pretty religion of flowers. It is that, obviously, because beauty is beauty, but it's the radical ability to see beauty in everything and everyone. And so now you say, God is not hanging out in some loka. God is here and God is now. And nor is God in a specific place like Vrindavan or Puri or Kolkata or Mayapur. No, God is everywhere equally. And any location is a fit location to meet my God. And that's actually what the gopis you see. That's what they experience. They see Krishna in everything. Everything. Tatra, tatra, yatra, yatra, where yatra, yatra, tatra, tatra, wherever and whenever, there they see Krishna. So they're having this non-dualistic experience. If you look at Mirabai, it's totally non-dualistic. She's totally absorbed in Krishna in this totally non-dualistic way. But that's the emphasis. The whole thing is, remember, these different religions are all equally valid. They're just different emphases. And so in this community, the emphasis is more on immediate immanence here and now non-duality, without a hierarchicalization of Shakti and without a stratification of pure or impure. It's an emphasis on recognition, on jnana, and the metaphysics is slightly different in that the love affair between Shiva and Shakti is your love affair with the immediacy of your experience, right? Yeah, exactly. Nora said yesterday, if you want to kiss God, kiss your own hand, or better yet, go into the street and find a stranger who reviles you and give them a big hug. Practice this safely. Some of you might not in society circumstances be advised to do this, but like Saint Francis, right? He went out and he just hugged the leper. That's Shaivism, you guys. Like seeing God in man, kiss a goblin. Oh my God. What? Okay, I'm not endorsing or I'm not telling you to be chaotic and run out into the world and be crazy. Like if you make pretense, you'll just get sick. If you lick a urinal before your Shiva, and you're already Shiva, if you lick a urinal before you recognize your Shiva, you're going to get horribly ill, you'll die, and you won't realize that you're Shiva. If you eat another person's feces now, woe be to you, you don't have the Shakti to digest it. Don't do it. Right? I'm not saying you should do these things without a guru and without proper instruction, and you have to understand who you are and what you are. But ultimately, when you know your Shiva, now your purpose is not to serve your Krishna like a loyal servant. Your purpose is to exert your will and power upon the universe and enjoy your own empowered freedom. It's a different bhav. The enlightenment looks different. It's about being Bhairava, poetic rapture. It's not about going to a loka, but recognizing that whatever loka you're in, it's my playground. I could be in a charnel pit in hell. I'll have just as much fun there as in Krishna Loka. And I could be in Krishna. I could totally be a gopi in Krishna Loka. But even if I'm doing ring around the roses there with Krishna, putting flowers in his hair or something, I never forget that he's Shiva and I'm Shiva. And that all of this is, I never forget that I'm Shiva. You see, it's a different kind of thing. So I thought you guys would enjoy that. I thought that was kind of a juicy thing to talk about. I hope it was not controversial. I'm not at all privileging one school over another. They're all just differences in emphasis. But I did want to say, before we finish this whole discussion on Gaudiya Vaishnavism, obviously my treatment of it was fairly glib and fairly clumsy. Just looking at the time, I thought, okay, I don't want to get too much into it, but I do. And maybe another night we'll have that conversation. More nuance. Like, what does it mean for Shiva to love Shakti? And how is that different from Krishna and Radha, if at all? Right? Okay, we'll leave it at that for now. So the difference primarily is the emphasis on more non-duality. A radical form of non-duality is what the Kaulatrika is interested in. Emphasis on the goddess, but the god. So in Krishna Radha, the emphasis is on imitating Radha in order to love Krishna. But here the emphasis is on being Krishna and loving Radha. In other words, being Shiva and loving your Shakti, which is nothing but your own manifest reality. So you're more likely to worship people, humans. You're more likely to do puja to actual humans. You're more likely to do transgressive practices. But otherwise, it's the same. Otherwise, when you look at it, it's just fervor. It's just devotion. And if you look at Utpala Deva, we'll close with that statement from Utpala Deva. He says, his prayer is this: all I want, my Lord, is to drink the liquor of thy devotion freely. He says this at the end of his Shiva Stotravali. All I want, my Lord, my only prayer, my Lord, is to drink the liquor of thy devotion freely and to dance mad with joy in the cremation ground, surrounded by the 9 ghosts, the 9 senses. Wow. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Saradarpanam Astu. Om Tat Sat. Om Har Har Mahadev. Thank you all.